This is Shalom World Podcast.
Welcome to Voyage. This is a podcast where we take you to the world of the Apocalypse of John. This is the book of Revelation. I am your host, Frances Hogan. Welcome to our reflections on the book of Revelation, and I want to finish reflecting on chapter 14 in this segment. And John is dealing with the harvesting of the earth, and he wants to deal with it under the heading of the grain harvest and the grape or the vine harvest. Okay, so just to remind you what I've said before, that he saw one like a son of man with a gold crown on his head, putting the sickle in. Okay. And this looks so much like Jesus. It is disputed as to whether this is an angel or whether it is Jesus himself. Supposing it's Jesus himself, I'm not going to make a definitive decision about it. Then look back at chapter 5, verses 7 to 8, where we saw Jesus as the lamb, who is also the lion, taking possession of the sealed scroll containing the future of the human race. And then in chapter 6, Jesus began to unroll the scroll, in other words, let the event actually happen. And then here in chapter 14, verse 1, it would mean that he decides the harvest is ready. Because I've shown you in Matthew 13 that Jesus is both the sower and the reaper. So it means that the harvesting of the earth, it's his decision, it's his action, it's his reign. He's the Alpha and the Omega. He's the beginning and the end. He's the sower and the reaper together. So it certainly makes sense that it is Jesus himself that's actually showing himself here. Of course, the angels are the ones who actually do it for them because they're his servants, all right? But it does seem to be a description. Now, I want to show you an important text from Isaiah chapter 63, verses 1 to 6. So you will see that when John is using the image of the grape harvest, that he is not thinking of the first person to think of this. Again, he goes back to the prophets of old and he takes the message from them. And of course, he goes back to Jesus to get the message as well. Who is this coming from Edom, from Bozrah, in garments stained with crimson, so richly clothed, marching so full of strength? It is I, the Lord says, who speak of integrity and am powerful to save. And then the prophet says, but why are your garments red? Your clothes as if they had trodden the winepress. And the Lord answered, I have trodden the winepress alone. Of the men of my people there was nobody with me. In my anger I trod them down, trampled them in my wrath. Their juice spattered my garments, and all my clothes are stained. We're going to see this again in chapter 19. For in my heart was a day of vengeance. My year of redemption had come. I looked and there was nobody to help me. Aghast, no one could I find to support me, as Jesus found that in Gethsemane. There was literally nobody, not even anyone of his 12 disciples. My own arm then was my mainstay, my wrath, my support. I crushed the people in my fury, trampled them in my anger, and made the juice of them run all over the ground. This is the language that John is using here in the chapter 15. Also, if you go to the prophet Joel, chapter 4 and verse 13, he uses exactly the same language. He says, put the sickle in, the harvest is ripe. Come and tread, the winepress is full, the vats are overflowing, so great is their wickedness. So it's the image of the judgment under using the image of harvesting, which I think is very interesting, because if you look at the use of the image of the grape harvest, then you'll know that when the grapes are ripe, they have to be harvested. Otherwise, they'll be destroyed. And so there comes a moment when this must happen. All of us know that there is a moment for both a mother and an infant in her womb where that child must leave the womb, or the child and the mother will die. The mother has given life to the child, but this moment is a critical moment. And so this critical moment of judgment is at the absolute right time. And so we remember back in chapter 10, verse 7, we were warned that the waiting time is over. And now we're told the harvest time has come. Let me give you that in the language of John's Gospel. The hour has come. The hour has come means that it's God's kairos time for intervening in human affairs. It's when God takes over and says, I'm doing it. You stand back. This is my action. Okay. And so Jesus spoke of his hour as the time of his martyrdom, or the time when he trod the winepress alone, as I have just read in Isaiah 63, okay? And there was nobody to help him. So that was his hour. But that hour of the facing of God's wrath all alone for the redemption of the human race was also his hour of glory, as we have seen with the martyrs. Their torture ends up in glory. And Jesus himself told us that the hour was known only to the Father. Even the Son on earth was not told what that hour was. It's very moving that the hour has come. And so what is it that makes this hour? And I want to try and say this clearly. It's a moment in which God knows that the human race is fixed in its decision, either for or against him, that they are not going to change. And this is going to be proven in chapter 16, that the human race is fixed, unfortunately, against him. So that's the hour. He knows, in other words, the decisions have been made. There's no point in going on any further. They're not going to go any different. So they've made their decision. So up to this moment in time, we were in the valley of decision, but now the decision is over. Everybody is in the place they have chosen to be in. It's important for us to realize that nothing is arbitrary. If God delays the judgment, he knows there's still a possibility of some people coming through, some people coming back to him, some people repenting. And so he will delay and he will delay and he will delay. But there comes a moment when it's all over. It's all over. You have in Matthew 13:30, Jesus saying, especially in verse 38, let them both grow to harvest time and then we'll deal with them. That's the wheat and the darnel. They both grow to harvest time. Mark 4:29 says, but when the crop is ready, we lose no time. Amos 8:2 says, my people are ripe for destruction. I will no longer overlook their offenses. So you can see that there is a particular moment when humanity has made its decision, and so God makes his decision and it goes forward. Okay. So when you come to vintage, don't forget that the vine is God's people. Isaiah chapter 5, Jesus chapter 15 in John's Gospel. I am the vine. So if we're going to have a harvest of the vine, then you're dealing with the uncommitted in the church, or the people who have gone astray, or whatever it is. I'll read it from verse 17 for you. Another angel, who also carried a sharp sickle, came out of the temple in heaven. And the angel in charge of the fire left the altar and shouted to the one with the sharp sickle, put your sickle in and cut all the branches off the vine. Well, Jesus said if branches didn't bear fruit, they were going to be cut off. And don't forget that the angel at the altar, this is the altar of Holocaust, where the martyrs were still back in the scenario of chapters 4 and 5 before God's throne. So that would make sense then that if Jesus actually spoke and told them to go ahead and put the sickle in. Okay. But here we're dealing with branches of the vine, and that's what makes us really sit up and take notice. Okay. Cut off the branches off the vine, all the grapes are ripe. In other words, the good ones and the bad ones, they're all ripe. So the angel set his sickle to work on the earth and harvested the whole vintage of the earth and put it into a huge winepress, the winepress of God's anger, outside of the city. Oh dear, it is the wicked that were to be punished outside of the city. Don't forget, when we come to Revelation 21 and 22, you'll be told very clearly that all the wicked are outside of the city. They are not in the city. So outside of the city, where it was trodden until the blood that came out of the winepress was up to the horses' bridles, as far as 1,600 furlongs, which is approximately 200 miles. Okay, so here we have a judgment coming to the vine. Okay, and don't forget that the angel, as I said, came from the altar of Holocaust, and therefore there is a connection between the the prayer of the martyrs, which we had back in chapter 8, verses 3 and 5. There's a prayer, the prayer of the martyrs and the outcome. I also look up chapter 6, verses 9 and 10. Okay. In other words, the intercession of the church has a huge effect on what actually happens on the earth. This is very important. Notice how powerful the intercession of the martyrs is. Notice how powerful the prayer of the church is. This is extremely important. We need to know we are heard in the place of power. We're heard in the only place that can deal with everything upon the earth. There's no point in talking to the beast or the false prophet. Forget about it. It's a waste of time. You go to the source of all power. And so the winepress of God's anger is that they have to actually face God's wrath. So Jesus faced that, and you can read it in Lamentations chapter 1, verses 12 to 13. All alone, he faced the anger of God for us. So if we come to the point of having to face the anger of God, that we have no excuse. And the reason is, the second person of the most blessed Trinity became man and gave his life for us, and he faced the anger of God to set us free. He paid the price. We have no excuse, none whatsoever. So we should never be experiencing God's wrath. We should only be experiencing God's love. So the choice for everybody, Christian and everybody else, is the blood of the Lamb or the blood of justice. Your choice. And so we're told that the result is absolutely catastrophic. There will be vast quantities of blood. Now, blood, of course, means death. And he actually gives you two images which are important. And he takes them from the destruction of Palestine by Vespasian, who became emperor, and his son Titus, who followed him as emperor. They began their destruction of Palestine from the north, and they went systematically down through the nation. And the historian Josephus says that when they were finished, the Sea of Galilee looked as if it was full of blood. They left oceans of blood behind them. And that's why John says that the blood was up to the horses' bridles. I mean, that's a lake. It's unbelievable. And the distance he gives you is actually the full length of Palestine. So he's going back there for the image that he wants to give us to describe something that's going to happen up here. In other words, when it comes to the justice of God, all who have rebelled against God, all who have chosen the beast, all who have chosen Satan, all of them will face that justice. It'll be too terrifying to think about. Okay? And so what we're talking about here is the total destruction of the wicked. We either have the kingdom of God on earth or we have the kingdom of Satan. We can't have both. And we're not going to have both. The description of the new heavens and the new earth in chapters 21 and 22 literally does not allow for any of this stuff. But Isaiah warned us about this in chapter 35 of his book when he gave a most wonderful summary of the whole thing to us. For example, and I'll just take it from a little bit further down. I'll take it from verse 8. And through it will run a highway undefiled, which will be called the sacred way. No unclean will be allowed on it. No fools will travel on this. A fool is someone who has chosen Satan. No lion will be there, nothing destructive. No fierce beast will roam there, but the redeemed will walk this path. Those whom the Lord has ransomed shall return. They shall come to Zion shouting for joy with everlasting joy on their faces. Joy and gladness will go with them, and sorrow and lament will be ended. Zion there represents heaven. When we arrive at our destiny in heaven, where it's all joy, all glory, all peace, all thanksgiving, all blessing, all God, all love. And so the sheer terror of anybody choosing anything else is beyond description. I'm going to leave it there for today. Thank you for listening. Slán agus Banach they live. Goodbye. God bless you.
Thank you for joining us today. We'd like to hear what you thought of today's session. Share your feedback with us at podcast@shalomworld.org. You can motivate and support us today. shalomworld.org/donate. Visit shalomworld.org for more information about Shalom World podcasts. To get the latest updates, make sure you follow us on Instagram at Shalom World Podcasts. Shalom World Podcasts is now available on all online platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and others.